Hi, my name is Kaushal Shah and I'm a cinematographer, and we're going to go over a few scenes from Gehraiyaan today, and I'm happy for you all to tag along. The film is all about intimacy. The film is all about creating a dance in a way between actors and the camera. The camera had to feel a part and an extension of the environment of the actors, which is why I was looking for a camera that would help me not come in the way of performances, but help the actors in a way where they don't feel overburdened, because there was a lot of intimate scenes, there was a lot of action, obviously. So I shot the film on the Sony Venice on the master anamorphics. The great thing about this camera is that it breaks into two parts. There's a technology called the Rialto that they have come up with, where only the head and the front element of the body with the lens comes in your hand, and the bigger part of the body can stay away. So the camera becomes a small, almost DSLR size camera, and there's a lot of times where the actors came in and they told me that we don't even feel you're there. And that's what the goal was. We wanted to not make them feel that we're there, because when you're shooting intimacy, obviously there's been a lot of talk about intimacy coordinators and stuff like that in the media, but I think an extension of that is how do your HODs make the actors feel that they're not there, and the actors, when they're performing something like this, you have to be very sensitive, and that's where the Venice really helped, because I was literally with a box-sized camera with my lens on and just holding it when I was there. Gehraiyaan was a film that always had texture written in its script, and that's where I wanted to shoot it on lenses which don't feel very clean and perfect. But yet, we knew that we were always going to be using an extreme balance of close-ups and wide shots. So I went with master anamorphic lenses. Anamorphic obviously is the widescreen format, but the anamorphic lenses that I chose was a great balance between not being too distracting in terms of the texture that's used. It's not like the bokehs, and like the feel of the lenses is super grungy, but it was not also very clean. And I think that balance was very, very important for a film like Gehraiyaan. It's very important to not be dictating terms when it comes to visual storytelling. It's important to just stay a little back from what the story wants to be. You're always pushing the story forward. It's the most important thing. And that's where I think these lenses really help. We obviously had marked out certain focal lengths of a lens that we would use for certain characters. We use something that we call the thinking pass. What that means is that when we want to show in a scene that an actor is thinking about something, we use these magnifications, and we obviously did some tests with it, and the director liked a particular mag, which was a 75, in a certain way. Like, we would not do a normal close-up, we would probably go a little higher, and it just felt that we are sort of looking through the character, we're looking within, we're trying to look into what the person might be thinking. It begins with the audience starting to realize that Zain has something on his mind. And while that is happening, Alicia is sitting outside and she understands that this is happening. So a lot had to do with how they're processing this information, and that's where these thinking passes helped. So even when we were on set, we used to capture the scene, and then we used to speak between each other, and we used to say that, you know what, we have a thinking pass left, which meant that we have to shoot the entire scene, but we're going to be there, And that helped the editor to sort of create this grammar where if we wanted to show what is actually happening inside the characters' minds, we would go on these awkward angles, and you would probably see it throughout the film. It had a tone through it where it would not always be in your face. It was not being spoon-fed. Sometimes you would just be there, just a little behind. And it would create this mystique, it would create this sense of drama in the person's mind itself and not just around it. Gehraiyaan is like a simmering drama, how I like to call it. The film begins in a certain way, and then you start sort of analyzing the characters as the film flows, and you start realizing the grey behind each character. So the crux of the film is that, and the climax, the visual tone was all about capturing body language, capturing expression, capturing detail, like a shiver, or like a person tapping the nails, or like these kind of details. Technically, I think it was a very interesting. One of my fondest memories was actually doing the yacht scenes, because the entire crew was in the middle of water between Bombay and Alibag, and we used to have a huge barge that was attached to the yacht, and there was a lot of obviously night lighting that we had to tackle cinematographically, and we had to create like a big moon box. And the mood itself, I thought visually it will work if it's not very bright, you know. You can say more as a cinematographer when you're hiding things. I believe in that. And so there's a lot of lighting which is sort of directional, and there's a lot of hiding that happens. We're not really showing what is happening as a slap. There's a lot of hiding. There's a lot of compositions which are sort of observing things from far out. There's a lot of action that is captured where you're in there. So a lot of it just happens organically, and me and Shakun obviously, and the action director, all of us, including actors, we had rehearsed this scene for a long time on the yacht. It's very important sometimes to have your actors and your technical crew prepare where you're going to execute the scene instead of it doing somewhere else. A scene like this involved a lot of physiological action between actors, as you call it. You know, there's a lot of physicality involved that you need to capture. It's not combat, it's not fight that happens between, you would see in like a proper action film, you know. It's two people who do not know how to fight, and that was the most important thing that me and the director, we kept in mind when we shot this. It's like these two people, they're normal human beings. Obviously one of them very rich, the other also sort of a person from an elite economy or whatever, but they don't really fight, you know. So hence the warfare should not feel like they've practiced it all along, and that's where the accidental pushes and capturing a hand thudding and like just the intimacy of the fight was very important. And that's where we wanted to make it feel rugged, as if it's not rehearsed, as if it's happening how it is, you know. And that's where I think visual language is the most important. Your cinematography and your blocking plays in mind, because the director and the cinematographer have to capture it in a way where it will never seem like the actors have rehearsed it, because ultimately the action is not the forefront of the scene. The scene is what's happening emotionally through Alisha's mind as she's about to rescue herself is more important in the film than the fight itself. So it was very important for us to lens it in a way where while this is happening, we're always trying to focus on emotion, and that's where these close-ups came in the language, where we would, in the middle of this action, we would go there, you know, we would go on this magnification, we would go in awkward angles to sort of explore how these characters are feeling more than us trying to show the audience, look how they are, you know. So obviously you are leading a department, and I'm a cinematographer, and my job is to actually not always run into situations where if I'm shooting in the water that I go there, but we obviously were very lucky with a film like Gehraiyaan where the budgets allowed us to do it in the right way. And I think there was a very complicated dream sequence that we shot where Zain is on the yacht and he's frustrated, and his wife comes in and she's talking, and somehow his frustration is visually narrated in the scene in a way where we show that he suddenly pushes her, and the camera had to dramatically shock the audience, and that shock value was designed, I think it was already on the script, so the credit goes to the director for this, where he had imagined this sequence to be a scene where the camera would just jump in with her into the water, and the camera would go into the water and it would show the struggle of her in the water and show her going away, only to realize that this was all happening in his head. So the shock value came with the camera going in with her, and obviously we were very lucky to have a great stunt team that had flown in from the UK for this. They took care of Tia, and she was brave enough to agree for this. The actors were outstanding on Gehraiyaan in terms of being sporting and agreeing to do something like that. So we did a lot of tech rehearsals. There were 2-3 days of only tech rehearsals for this, where the yacht was parked in the middle of water, in the middle of Bombay and Alibag, and we had this barge that I had mentioned, and there was a crane that we shot it with, and there was a Ronin that we rigged. So the Ronin was rigged on cables. The Ronin is this balancing device that you use nowadays to stabilize a movement. So it at least took 4-5 days of tech prep when this happened. I think more than me being taken care of, I have to take care of the people who I have hired to do this job. It's my duty to sort of guide them in the right way. You know, it's always important to understand what the film requires, because you can always get overburdened by so much technical stuff happening around you. So my job was to focus on what does the scene require emotionally, and not to overdo that, you know. So despite having all the great technique that I had at my disposal, budgets and everything, I think it's important to understand what we needed from the scene and stick to that. So what we needed was her falling and the shock value, and the technical approach went with that, obviously. And the stunt people obviously rehearsed it for days before they could fall like that in water. So it's like 1 second in the film, and it took 7 days to execute. The scene that they have sort of explores a discord between them in a way where Alicia's dissatisfaction and expectations that have probably not come true or haven't happened from her father sort of come out as they speak.
It was your fucking fault, just accept it. और ये जगह कचरा रखने की?
Did she say that it was my fault?
हाँ?
उसने कहा ऐसा?
No wonder she fucking hated it here.
उसने कहा क्या कि मेरी गलती?
बोलने की जरूरत नहीं थी. She fucking hung herself.
No sunlight again was something that I just felt. It just felt right. Sometimes you just feel that something is right for a scene, and usually it's those instinctive choices that make and break a scene. And there's this sense of coldness in the scene because you sort of know that she's not happy about this, and there's expectations, and the father has his own reasons, and this unrest between them can be captured very well with the combination of these craft elements, which was not having a lot of sun in it, capturing it on like tighter lenses where you're observing the characters and then showing and composing them in a way where they don't feel that they are one, you know. That's very important, that they're not one. And all choices in terms of blocking and compositions went with that thought. We didn't want it to feel very warm as a scene, and that's where it does feel a bit muted. The colors are a bit grey, you know, and what she's wearing is also not very colorful, and the light falls in a way where it's always hiding one side of the face, and it's trying to say that there is a lot that's happening in the grey where the unrest is just sort of simmering. The second scene actually happens towards the end where they have come to terms with the faults of the past, and they do understand that ultimately it's important to be there for each other, and there's a sense of intimacy in a positive direction between them.
They've ruined everything for everyone.
Oh no, come on, don't say that. उसकी जिंदगी उसे एक गलती से बड़ी थी.
So yeah, you see her in the passage, and she turns and they speak, and she goes and sits there on the bed with him, and the moment is very intimate and warm, you know. He also breaks down, she breaks down. So it was very important for the scene to be lit in a way where it's taking you towards a positive direction, but it's still not feeling like happy, you know, like life is not really perfect in that sense. So I wanted to still keep it in the language of the film, but have the light do its thing, which is why you see that there was a window, and we shot this on a soundstage on a set in Goa. We had set up a studio, so I had the opportunity to shape it however I want. So I put up outside the window like a unit to sort of emulate the sun. We have certain units in our film inventory that emulate the sun a little bit. Obviously the sun, you cannot emulate the sun in a perfect way because there's nothing bigger than the sun ever, but there are certain lights that when you club, that will give you that throw, that will give you the way it really falls. And so I combined a few, we call it T12s, which means it's 12 kilowatts of light, and they fall in a very sharp way, and they're a slightly yellow sort of warm feel, which is tungsten as we say it. And it was very important to get the angle right. It had to hit the actors, but not in a way where it's taking my eyes off the performances, and but it had to do its magic. So that was the treatment that we went with, and obviously when you color grade this, you also keep in mind the treatment that you had when you light. So it had to feel like a difference between it being slightly more colder and whiter on the skin for the actors in the previous scene compared to slightly yellowish, warmish in this scene this time. Also, the lensing changed a bit. The lensing in the previous scene, we use a lot of like telephoto lenses where we are always from far away observing characters. We're not really in their space. But this time, when they're speaking, when they're on the bed, when they're sitting and really intimate, the camera was with them. The audience was with them this time. The audience had to feel what they're feeling. And that's where using wider lenses and being in the actors' spaces really help. You can be really close to the actors. You can capture their faces. Like I was there 2 feet away from the scene as it happened. And the goal was for me to make the audience be in my shoes. I think script is most important, and I think as a head of department, as someone who is as equal a storyteller in the film as every other person on the film set thing, but interpreting it in how the film wants you to interpret is the most important thing. And I believe, and I've always believed, that as a cinematographer, your job is not to take the audience away from the film. Your job is actually to do something that is right for the film. So sometimes it's important to not make it look extravagant. Sometimes it's the scene requires you to make it look subtle. The scene requires you to have the actors do the bit of performances. Obviously it looks right and it looks good. That's the basic thing. Your job is, the most basic thing a cinematographer would do is make an image look nice, but it has to look right. And that's where the focus on Gehraiyaan and probably on all other films I do is that my focus is on how I can make something look right, which means that what is written, when it's translated to image, it fits, instead of it looking like, oh my god, like wow, what light and stuff like that. Because for example, if that light coming from the back for a scene where Alicia and her father were sitting, if I would have made it like a shaft and a very like outrageously gorgeous light, people would be thinking about that light more than feeling the performance. So I think a balance is very important, and I mean that's where like it really depends on who your idols are when you're learning the craft and what kind of work do you get inspired by. And as a cinematographer, I've always been inspired by filmmaking that is not very loud, filmmaking that is subtle, but it is so efficient that it's doing its thing.